following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back when the Jints and the Bums played in New York. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the two mavens of the times are here with us. Mr. Noel Hynd, how are you, sir?
I'm okay. Thank you, Ralph.
Good. And Mr. Alan Blumkin.
Yeah, I'm here from New York. Huh.
Alan's in New York. Noel's in Southern California. I'm in Northern California. Noel and I will agree that both parts of the state are just in terrible peril. These fires are horrible, and it's become the norm each year. But there's no climate change, nothing, no problems. Don't worry about anything. Anyway,
no,
guys,
the only thing I worry about is the way that poor man in the White House is just being persecuted so unfairly by his enemies. And if anybody could tell, I'm kidding.
And, of course.
They gave him a loving reception at the Nationals Park the other night.
Yes.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, and he don't even get me started.
Yeah, right.
I would take the full 45 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
you have to split with me and Ralph.
I digressed before, and we've done that, and that doesn't hurt once in a while. We've got to do, in the very near future, a segment on how things were politically in the times when Dem Bums and the Jints played in New York. Different times, but perilous in their own way, and we'll talk about that another time. You guys are going to talk about corner-outfielders of the three teams that
I have. I'll do the Yankees, and Noel can do the Giants, and we'll decide on who's going to be the Dodgers, because that's the most complicated one.
I've already decided you're going to do it, because you know the Dodgers a hell of a lot better than I do.
Okay.
Well, I've already decided that you both know more than I'll ever know.
Well, there's Carl Ferrollo and there's everybody else in left field. They all loaded them back then. Yeah.
Right. Well, say hello to Sandy Amoros for me.
Yeah.
His name will come up.
And
Yogi's name will follow very quickly. But
Yogi played along with Hector Lopez. They platooned on that 1961 Yankee team.
I'll go back to when they were in the Dodgers and Giants were still in New York. The Yankees had basically Gene Woodling and Hank Bauer.
Okay, guys, have at it. Have a great show, and I appreciate your contributions.
Okay. I think we're alone now. That means we can talk about Ralph instead of corner outfielders. That will get him back pretty quickly.
Well, that would be a boring topic. Boring topic alert. Please don't talk about Ralph. Or better yet, as Mose Allison would say, please don't talk about me when I'm gone. Be well, guys. Enjoy.
Okay. Thanks. Corner outfielders, New York Giants. The image that comes to me most quickly, really, despite the fact that Bobby Thompson hit the most famous home run probably in New York baseball history, is Monty Irvin, who was a wonderful player, and it is an absolute. Obviously, he was one of the first black players signed by the Giants. Came up and played, I think, mostly left field for the team in 1951, and was a huge part of their pennant drive that year. It's hard to talk about Monty Irvin without talking about the man. He had been a star in the Mexican League, a star in the so-called Negro Leagues at the time, and he was an outstanding soldier in World War II. I believe he fought at the Battle of the Bulge. When he came back after the war, after fighting for, as he noted in his biography, the oppressed He frequently in later years would talk about how, as an African American, he would in World War II be fighting for the oppressed people in other nations, while his own people were oppressed in the United States. Nonetheless, he came to the Giants, I think, in the early 50s, maybe 49.
He basically came up full time in 1950.
Okay.
Yeah, he was already 31. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
He was already 31 years old. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of what I was saying. Here's a guy. Can you imagine if Hank Aaron or or Clemente or something didn't spend their 20s in Major League Baseball? It was the man was phenomenally talented. I would conjecture, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, that if Monty Irvin had been born a little later and had been able to play his entire career in the major leagues, he would be on most people's list of maybe the 20 greatest players ever. He was a phenomenally gifted ball player. In any case, he held down left field for the Giants in 51. I believe he was the regular in 1954 in left field.
Yes.
At the other corner was a guy who was really one of my favorite Giants in the 1956 and 57 season, which of the first ones that I can remember. And you know who I'm talking about, Mandrake the Magician, they called him, Don Mueller, who had a wonderful swing and was a wonderful contact hitter, nearly won the batting championship one year, I believe. I think he was fighting Willie Mays for it.
Yeah, that's 54 also, yeah.
That's 54.
Yeah.
And just a marvelously consistent player throughout the 1950s. He passed away a few years ago. I believe he was in his 80s.
Yeah.
But I could put forth the notion that when Irvin, and then I'll toss it to you for discussion, when the Giants had Irvin in left, Mays in center, and Mueller in right as their regulars, I think in the early 50s, that is when the three New York teams probably were as co-equal and evenly divided in terms of talent as they ever were. I'll throw that to you as a question and a starting point. What would you say to that?
Okay, I agree with you, but Irvin started as a first baseman when he came up to the Giants. God knows why, but in early 1951, DeRocha got the idea to switch Monty Irvin with Whitey Lockman. He brought Lockman into first base because all accounts I've read, Monty Irvin, he hated playing first base. And then what happened in 52, he broke his ankle in spring training, slide. Was out for 2/3, 3/4 of the season. And Mays went into the Army in May of 1952. So the only 3 real years they had together were 51, 54, and 55. And by 55, Irvin was slowing down. He was 36 years old. And they sent him to the Cubs after that season. He played there 1 year. I'll tell you a quick Don Mueller story. I read this book, The Miracle of Coogan's Bluff, by a guy named Thomas Kiernan. And Mueller was always, they always said about Mueller that if Dressen hadn't held duck, ordered them to hold dark at first base, and the bottom of the ninth, Mueller would have hit into a double play. So I got up there to get his autograph. I asked him about that. He said it would have been like duck hunting. If he saw that Hodges was playing off first base, he would try to hit the ball to center field, and he felt he never got credit enough for that. And of course, a few minutes later, he would break his ankle sliding into third base on Whitey Lockman's double. So the only time that the three of them ever played in the World Series together was 1954.
And that went pretty well for the Giants.
Yeah. And in 1951, when Mays came up, Hank Thompson was playing third base and having problems, so they benched him and brought Bobby Thompson in from center field to play third base. And I think Thompson went back out to center. Bobby Thompson went back out to center field when Mays went into the military.
Well, in 51, Leo did a lot of juggling of the lineup, and that, from what I've learned of that season, and I think that was part of the sort of the way the Giants fell behind. They didn't really have in the standings, and then when they finally had a solidified lineup, that plus maybe a little help from the center field clubhouse with swiping signs, that's when they put the tear on that finally caught up to the Dodgers. Would I be correct on that?
Yeah. Well, the Dodgers started to slump around that time. They didn't play all that great in the last part of August and September, and Charlie Dressen, who I totally disliked as a manager, ruined the pitching staff, and by the time they got to the playoff series, he had no relievers.
Mm-hmm.
And because he had used Clem LeBlanc as a starter in the second game. And he had no relievers because that's why he brought in Branco, who was a starting pitcher, very rarely ever pitched in relief into that game, especially since Thompson hit a home run off of him in the first game of that playoff.
Right. Everybody forgets about that first game. I think it was it 3-1 Giants?
Yeah, Jim Hynd. Yeah.
Yeah, but considering how much scrutiny has gone to that final game of that series, most people know very, very little about that particular the full 3 games of the series.
Yeah. What happened in the first game? The Giants started Jim Hynd, and the Sky Thomas Cannon, who wrote the book on Coogan's Bluff, tried to do a Boys of Summer thing with as many of the Giants as were possible. So in the chapter on Jim Hynd was saying he had a very bad side. Around one of his areas was hurting him a lot, so he's rubbing some mint on it, some gel on himself every game. And he said Westrom did a marvelous job in leading him through that game. And Branco had started because Rowe had a little bit of an arm problem at that point, and Newcomb had been used extensively at the end of the season. And so he started Branco, and Branco gave up home runs to both Monty Irvin and Bobby Thompson in that first game.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dodgers also won the toss for the extra home game. They decided that they chose to have the first game at Ebbets Field and the second and third games at the Polo Grounds. And what happened, of course, was that Campanella pulled the thigh muscle, and he didn't use Campanella in either of the 2 games at the Polo Grounds because he felt there was too much foul territory to cover.
Right.
So, I think Dressen was a very poor manager, and I put down several posts on Facebook that the Dodgers won the pennants in 52 and 53 despite him, not because of him.
Yeah, and you could further argue, of course, that they went belly up in the World Series both years, and many Dodger fans of the times kept thinking, we should have won at least one of those series in 52 and 53. The franchise was probably even stronger then than it was in 55.
Well, in 52, the Yankees won the last 2 games in Ebbets Field.
Right, yeah.
Which is incredible by itself. And in 53, they won 105 games and been considered the best Brooklyn team ever to play. The 53 Dodgers, and the Yankees beat them 6.
Yeah.
So, and then of course he asked for the 3-year contract after that season. because some of the other managers were getting it, and O'Malley offered him one, and Justin rejected it. They let him go. And they brought in Alston, who was there forever after that. Signing one-year contracts, for 23 years, I think it was.
Yeah, 23 one-year contracts. The Alston was a minor league manager for them, wasn't he? Before, was he in Montreal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did he manage? Who was the manager for Robinson in Montreal?
Clay Hopper, his name was. He was a Southerner from Mississippi who didn't particularly like having Robinson, but Robinson won him over.
Huh. Okay.
But Alston had a one career at bat with the 36 Cardinals, and he struck out.
That's right. A little bit like Tom Lasorda, actually. Very brief major league appearance, and then a long managerial career. Dodgers corner outfielders. It starts, I guess, with Carl Furillo, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, Carl Furillo was the right fielder there, forever, practically, and he, outside of 1952, when he had eye problems, he was very, very consistent. He always hit around 300. Drove in 90 to 100 runs, and was a tremendous right fielder in Ebbets Field. He knew all the nooks and crannies, and a gun for an arm. And I think he's, of the long-term boys of summer, he is the one that's most overlooked.
With the possible exception of Gil Hodges, who really should be in the Hall of Fame, but we're going off on another tangent if we start talking about that.
Well, Gil Hodges achieved a lot of fame as the manager of the Mets.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
But Furillo just went out, did his job. He wasn't very educated, so he felt that he couldn't hang out with Erskine and Snyder and reach this. Some of the other Dodger players that were highly socialized. Okay, left field they had everybody.
If I remember from, let's stay with Furillo for a second, or Furilla, as they used to call him. I believe I read in the Boys of Summer like 40 years ago that it was always said that Furillo could throw out a runner at first if the ball was hit sharply in front of him and he took it on a bounce. And he claimed that over the course of his career, he got tired of hearing about that, and he only threw out one. Would that be true?
Yeah. There was a Pirate pitcher named Mel Queen who hit a sharp, what would have been single, and he threw him out at first base. Furillo also had a passionate hatred of Leo DeRocha, going back to the days when DeRocha managed them in Brooklyn. And in 1953, Furillo was, way ahead for the batting title, and they got into a fight. And Furillo had his hand stepped on, and he was out for the rest of the regular season because that he still held on to win the batting title by 2 points over Red Schoendienst. But, because Furillo, it started because Furillo thought whoever was pitching for the Giants to throw at him. And when the brawl broke out, Furillo didn't go after the pitcher. He went after DeRocha.
What was the origins of the dislike? Do you know?
I don't know. It just mutual. Furillo wasn't rah-rah. And supposedly Furillo had been named as one of the petition signers against Jackie Robinson, which Furillo always denied and always resented. He thought that DeRocha was the pushing that
to discredit him. Frankly, I would give for a little the benefit of the doubt on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Because DeRocher could be a pretty nasty character. And let's just say that several things that Leo said over the years were as was said in the Nixon administration, at variance with the truth.
Yeah.
So DeRocher's credibility is not exactly stellar. While we're on DeRocher for a second, surely you know about the incident with Babe Ruth's watch when DeRocher was with the Yankees.
Yeah.
What's your spin on that? What do you think happened?
I had no idea. That's way before our time. Knowing DeRocher and knowing how much they hated each other, that they hated each other. That DeRocher probably took it.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Just to backtrack for anyone who's listening who doesn't know about the incident, it was in the 1920s, and DeRocher was the shortstop for the Yankees. I think it was his first year or two in the major leagues, and one of the chores on the Yankees in spring training was putting Babe Ruth to bed, because he would often come staggering in at late hours and completely drunken, and somebody had to take him to his room and put him down for the night. And he had a beautiful, I think it was a pocket wristwatch at the time. He was a very wealthy man, probably the wealthiest ball player in the United States. And DeRocher, from time to time, would volunteer to put the Babe away. And one night, DeRocher comes back in. People said he had his watch. DeRocher puts him to bed, and the next morning, Ruth cannot find his watch. And the story always was that DeRocher took it and hawked it and sold it somewhere in Florida. There was never any proof to that, but the story persisted. And DeRocher also, whether it was true or not, had a reputation of being, quote, a locker room thief, unquote, among a lot of sports writers when he was with the Yankees, which subsequently resulted in him being let go and sent to the Cardinals. I forget whether they sold him or they traded him.
Went to the Reds before he went to the Cardinals.
That's right.
Yeah, the thing with Leo is...
Go ahead.
Yeah, have you ever read Nice Guys Finish Last?
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, his autobiography, and everything was somebody else's fault. He was brought up to be very, very hard scrabble, and never given to anybody on anything. But the only thing nice I can think about saying about him was when the chips were down, he was a fairly decent manager. He would lose interest in teams that were not good, and he didn't see color.
Yes, that brings up another question about DeRocher. In terms of race, Leo loved to annoy people, and I always kind of got the idea that Leo, by pushing the welfare of black players, knew he was annoying people. Do you think that kind of factored in, or do you think he was just sort of like John McGraw, I just want to put the best team out there because I want to win?
Yeah, well, the story is with him, one of the main stories I've read in several sources, when they brought Pete Reza to camp in 1940, DeRocher fell in love with him. And he was screaming for him for 1940, and MacPhail sent him to Elmira. DeRocher had no knowledge that MacPhail had made a promise to Ricky. Ricky was running the Cardinals then for services and favors done, that he was going to, a whole bunch of Cardinal farmhands had been freed by Landis, and Reza was one of them. And that the only one that Ricky was interested in getting back was Reza. So MacPhail owed him some favors, and he was ready to package Reza into a deal to go back to the Cardinals. DeRocher had no idea about this. And finally they brought Reeser up in 1941. He was all everything that year in the National League, and MacPhail realized, and Rickey both realized that he couldn't send the Reeser to the Cardinals, so they made a package of players, and the Dodgers, who were pretty rough financially in those days, included $100,000 in with this trade. Nobody can understand why, and it came out later that this was the payoff to keep Reeser. But the Rocha, I think the Rocha basically, unless he had a really, really bad personal relationship with the player, always saw talent and always wanted to play, people who could help him win.
Okay. Talk to me about Sandy Ambrose. Speaking of corner-outfielders.
Okay, the Dodgers.
He's probably the guy that most people our age most remember, and obviously because of the great play he made against Yogi in the World Series.
The Dodgers started the 50s with Gene Hermansky in the left field. In 1951, they got Andy Pafko from the Cubs in a big trade, and Pafko was there through 1952. And when they wanted to bring Jim Gilliam up, who played second base, they sold Pafko to Milwaukee.
Right.
Okay, the next one they had there, eventually Jackie Robinson played there. They tried Jackie at third base, and then they put him out in left field. Also, another one that was out there in those years, strictly for his hitting ability, was George Schuber. And Schuber was not very good defensively. So in the 1955 World Series, he had Zimmer playing the infield and Robinson playing in left field. I think it was Robinson left field. I may be wrong about that. He brought Gilliam. I think Gilliam was actually playing left field in that game. He brought Gilliam into play second base and took Zimmer out, and they put Ambrose out in left field. So at the bottom of the seventh, the Yankees put two men on, losing 2-0 in Game 7 at that point. And Yogi hit a slice to left field, and Ambrose, who was playing out of position, ran and made a one-handed catch. They turned into a double play that saved the Dodgers in that series. And if he had left anybody who was right-handed out there, the guy probably could have never gotten in position to even make a big effort catch out there. So it was a stroke of luck, and I've always resented that my all-time favorite Yogi was the one who hit that ball.
If that ball, I've looked at the replay on that. That ball would not have gone into the stands, I don't think. But it probably would have bounced in. It probably would have been a ground rule double. Would you agree on that?
Yeah.
Meaning, obviously, the Yankees would have gotten one run out of it, and then would have had runners on second and third, and that could have made the one more single, and the Yankees would have been ahead of Padres 3-2.
If they were playing today, and Padres allowed the hit at that point, that he would have been pulled immediately.
That's true. Who would have come into the game? Would it have been Labine?
Probably Labine, yeah.
Yeah.
In those days, relievers went more than one inning. They had to.
Yeah. The Louis Arroyo syndrome. He'd come in for maybe 1 2/3 or 2 1/3 and finish the game. Elroy Face used to come in situations like that.
No, it was extended to the late 70s and early 80s. It's only in recent years, basically since the 90s, that they came up with the closer routine. And now, of course, they've expanded it to a ridiculous amount, but that's time for another discussion. Let me discuss the Yankees, okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, the Yankees in the 50s had, most of the 50s, they had Gene Woodling in left field and Hank Bauer in right field. Now, the two of them both came up there for good in 1949. Woodling had led the Pacific Coast League in hitting. He led a couple of minor leagues in hitting and had trials with the Pirates and Indians. And Stengel managed against him in the Coast League in 1948 and recommended to Weiss that they get Woodling. So they got Woodling, and Bauer became a full-time Yankee in 1949. And what he did mostly, as long as DiMaggio was on the team, he had other outfielders, and he platooned Bauer and Woodling quite a bit. That ended basically when DiMaggio retired. The Yankees those years were platooning Jackie Jensen, and when Mantle came up, he played very, very few games in center field that first year. And once DiMaggio retired, Mantle became the full-time center fielder. They had traded Jackie Jensen to the Senators and cleared out a couple of other outfielders, and Woodling became the regular left fielder, and Bauer became the regular right fielder. And both of them were very, very clutch, and both of them had tremendous desire. And when they were being platooned, they would scream at Stengel every day. Whoever was sitting on the bench would scream at Stengel to let him play. Now, Woodling led the American League in, believe it or not, on-base percentage in 1953. And what happened in 1954, he had a very, very injury-riddled year where he hit .250 and didn't play in that many games. And Irv Noren, who they had gotten from Washington in the Jackie Jensen trade, was having a sensational year. Woodling hit .319. Noren hit .319, I'm sorry, and Woodling hit .250. So when they made the deal with Baltimore for Bob Turley and Don Larson, they sent Woodling to the Orioles. Woodling recovered and played the rest of his career basically with the Orioles and the Indians. He had a couple of really, really good years. Noren reverted to hitting .260 and was gone by the end of 1956.
To Kansas City, I think.
Of course, where else? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in 57, they used rookie Tony Kubek to go out there along with Elston Howard. And Howard didn't start making the big transition with Berra until 1959. Because in 1958, they had Norm Seaburn playing left field after he screwed up a couple of fly balls in a World Series game. Stengel said, I don't want him to get rid of him. And after 1959, they shipped him to where else? The Kansas City A's.
Kansas City, sure. As
part of the Roger Maris trade.
Right.
But Woodling was a very, very clutch player, and he did whatever he could to help the Yankees win. And Stengel said he always regretted having Weiss trade Woodling after 1954. In fact, there was a story that Woodling wound up on the 1962 Mets, and he was sitting next to Stengel, watching them blow another game, and Stengel turned to him and says, "This ain't like the old days, is it?"
And it wasn't.
It wasn't.
I always got the idea that Woodling was a very smart player. Would I be right about that?
Oh, yeah, very much so, yeah.
Yeah, it came across, even when he was with the Mets in '62. I always liked him with the Orioles. I'm not old enough to have remembered him with the Yankees, although the most famous play was probably in the 1950 World Series. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, where he dropped the fly ball and Ford pitched 8 2/3 innings. And Ford was a 21-year-old rookie, and Stengel brought Reynolds in to get the last out, and Ford said they thought they were booing him when he walked back to the dugout with Stengel, and Stengel said, "No, they're booing me." And Reynolds struck out the Phillies' backup catcher, Stan Lepat, at the end of the series.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, Woodley was especially effective against Cleveland. He was the hitting against them the way Eddie Lepat was the pitching against them. For some reason, his biggest games come against the Indians during his peak years with the Yankees.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
The play in the World Series, Woodling lost the ball in the sun, didn't he?
Yeah. And as Yogi Berra. Yeah, as Yogi Berra eloquently put it, it gets laid early out there.
Yeah, it was a terrible sun field. I can remember a lot of plays late in the season, and just from my own experience, a couple years ago, I went to the one of the Yankees fantasy camps, and I was out in left field, and somebody hit a fly ball out there, and I couldn't see it, and all I could think of was two things: Gene Woodling and protect my head. And fortunately, the thing landed about 10 feet behind me, but it was a hell of a feeling to lose something like that.
Well, Norm Seaborn was playing left field in the '58 World Series, where he messed up a couple of balls in the sun field. You know, back in those days, of course, they were all day games.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the sun would be setting late in the game over the upper deck at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And the ball would, anything hit the left field would get up into the sun. It was almost impossible.
It was an adventure out there, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing that when you think about that, it makes the Ambrose catch even more amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Although if Ambrose was a little bit out of position, it may have actually helped him pick up the trajectory of the ball, or maybe there were more clouds.
No, he's playing shading toward right field because Yogi was a pull hitter.
Yeah.
So Ambrose had to be shading him to right.
Yeah. But by being over a little to right, he may have had a better line on the ball.
Yeah,
Who
probably.
knows? Or maybe,
yeah.
Or maybe the ball didn't get up over the grandstand. If you had to just to wrap up.
I have to start discuss Bauer.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, give me a few minutes for that. Okay. Hank Bauer came up in 1949, and immediately Stengel fell in love with him. He hustled. He hustled quite a bit. And he of course was hurt by being a right-handed hitter whose power was to left center field in the old stadium. So his numbers aren't all that gaudy. But he always broke his back. He made the catch off Sal Evars in the bottom of the ninth in the sixth game in 1951 to save that game for the Yankees and win the World Series. He hit in 17 straight World Series games from 1956 through 1958. In the third game of the third game of the 1958 World Series, the Yankees won 4-0. He got all four of the hits and drove in all four of the runs. He got three of the hits. Got three of the four hits and drove in all four runs. And he really gave them, and he used to monitor the newcomers, the rookies, because in those days the World Series money was, compared to what they were getting paid during the season, was quite a bit. And he would go to all these rookies and say, "Don't screw with my money." And his face was described like a clenched fist. He had served in the Marines and received 11 battle stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and the Silver Star fighting in the Pacific. He was one of a handful of men returning from his unit. He was in the Marines, and he was just a very, very tough player who would do practically anything to win a game. And he, when he got to be 37 years old in 1959, the Yankees did him a favor at the end of the season. They sent him home to Kansas City, and he was part of the Roger Maris trade. He later went on to manage the 1966 Orioles to a World Series championship, and Woodling was one of his coaches.
Yeah, and even with the when he was with the A's as a player, even as an older player, I'm just looking at some numbers right now. He still hit 275 and 264. I'm sorry, he hit 265, 274, and 60 and 61, which didn't really reflected pretty well. He played, just to give listeners an idea of how integral Bauer was with the Yankees. He played for 9 years and was on 9. He was in the World Series from 49 to 58 with the Yankees. Played in 9 World Series over the course of I guess about 10 seasons. The only one he missed would have been 1954.
Yeah, and 59 also, but
59
nobody
also.
counts that. They weren't anywhere near it in 1959.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was quite a career, and he was 26 by the time he came to the Yankees in 1949.
Yeah.
So
was Woodling. They were born 16 days apart.
Yeah. Did Woodling serve in World War II also?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I have to look that up. I'm not sure, but they were born 16 days apart. Because I remember that from looking at the old cards all the time. The old baseball cards. I used to memorize the birth dates on the back, even though some of them were, shall we say, a little skewed, but not theirs. And but basically, I always wonder what happened with Woodling had he played in the his whole career in the major leagues with the Yankees.
Exactly. Memorizing all the old cards, I remember certain stats like as you say, the birthdays always stood out. The one, I'm going to throw a birthday at you and you tell me who was born then. November 21, 1920.
Stanley Frank Musial.
There you go, Alan. You're a genius. I could never get a Musial card, but I did later on.
There were no Topps cards on him until 1958. He was in a couple of the early Bowman sets, but he never signed with anybody. There's a dog food company called Red Heart that put out a set of 33 cards in 1954, and he's in that. But he never. Now all these people who do custom cards have created custom cards, Topps cards for all the years that Musial wasn't signed by them. But he had some reason or another. I don't know. Maybe he didn't think the money was good, because when Ted Williams signed the contract with Topps in 1954 for 5 years, he managed to get the magnificent sum of $400 a year from them.
Yeah, well, if you were Ted Williams, it didn't. I guess 400 wasn't that much, but of course, guys who were rookies and things, 400 would have, I guess, paid the mortgage for a month or so.
Yeah, they put out custom 52 and 53 Topps Williams, and 59 and 60, which is after this 5 years had run out. But any card that's reproduced from 1956 and back, the cars that they put out now are smaller because the standard size came in 1957. So there's no way in heck you could pass any of these off as legitimate.
Yeah.
Because the size
Very
is different.
True.
Yeah. And the Bowmans, the card stock is different. So it's you can't really do this.
True enough. I think that's it for today.
Okay.
Shall we wrap up? We've been on for a while, and always a pleasure. And we will speak again next week, I hope.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Of yourself. Bye. Thanks.
The proceeding has been a comfortably zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.